If I had my way, I would delete Linza from the game and rebuild her from the ground up. At least the big weapon part of Linza, where you sort of build a big weapon and strike your opponent. It's like a really uninteresting strike deck. Other strike decks have to build resources, AP. They have to manage their health. They actually have to play Chronicle. But Linza's strike deck is predicated exclusively on her draws. And okay, you can say every deck in every card game that's ever existed has, been dependent on its draws. But none more so than Linza. You either find what you're looking for on Chapter 1 or 2, or you don't, and you play nothing. The most highly optimized weapon Linzas will generate some gold very quickly from Goblin Flash Mob or Mimic, or whatever it is, and then buy a big weapon, such as the Tetsu Katana, or a Chaotic Longsword. And then from there, you want to build it a little bit with something like Barrel Chest, Dwarven Miner, whatever it is, and then you go to town on some of the outrageous demon cards that she has. Kalgur, Revenant Orc, Wilderness, Test of Might, and it's just such a linear style. Again, the most highly optimized decks will not run any bullshit. They won't run any jank. They won't run any heals. Armadillion Golem, nope. Rune Dragon, nope. Anything like that, nope. Because what you want to do is streamline and optimize the deck in such a way that you can increase the consistency to a maximum, where you get on Chapter 1 what you're looking for. Any jank, like all of those cards that I mentioned, is going to make your draws inconsistent. Because if you're playing Weapon Linza, you have to start the game on Chapter 1 or 2, and you have to finish the game on Chapter 2 or 3. Heals, Armor Gain, dragons with unrelated effects are all going to dilute your draw on Chapter 1. You're looking for gold gain, weapons, strikes. In exactly that order. All else is irrelevant. And okay, there's going to be that one guy in the comment on the Reddit saying, oh, I used my Armadillion Golem and I survived a game against an Ogre Chieftain and then I went on to kill him. And fine, that's going to happen sometimes. But I would argue the trade-off where you take that card out of your deck and put in something that I'm arguing is more relevant will, on average, increase your win rate. Because you'll get going more often. A higher percentage of the time your Chapter 1 will be successful because you'll find the cards you need to get going. So you won't pass Chapter 1 as frequently. You'll also draw into the damage cards more often. Overall, the deck will be stronger without the jank. That's an objective mathematical fact, and any argument against that will be qualitative and just a fallacy of anecdotal evidence. It'll be a story. Oh, I did this thing one time and it won me the game. It's also a deck with such polarized counterplay, because the reality of weapon destruction is, at least against Weapon Linza, that you either hit their weapon before they have a chance to get going, you hit it at that opportune moment just before they Artisan's Workshop or Barrel Chest or Dwarven Miner or whatever it is, before they build any durability, and then, they do the rest of their chapter as if they had a weapon but you've destroyed it, and they die to something like Kalgur or Revenant Orc. The other end of the spectrum is you hit their weapon too late. They've already gained that durability. And now you just remove some trivial number that doesn't matter because they have more than enough. And as it turns out, bar fights are strike, so a lot of the time they're going to hit you back and feel pretty good about it. And then sometimes you just totally miss, right? Like they skipped their Chapter 1 because they didn't find what they were looking for. You positioned your bar fight in a logical place, but there was nothing there because they skipped Chapter 1. And finally, I would argue that at the top of ladder, at least for the most experienced players, the cost-benefit analysis of weapon destruction points towards not running weapon destruction. Because in a lot of matchups, it just doesn't do anything. Or if it can do something, it'll miss. Because this is not Magic the Gathering, it's not an instance. You can't always hit what you're looking to hit. The reward can be very high, but only in the early game. Because, it can just straight up win you the game there. But then it can also miss in the early game, which is your most important time where you want to get rolling. And then in the mid to late game, the best thing that could happen is that you hit Jad, right? And if that happens, great, 15 damage, really nice. But there's only 2 Jads in their deck. That rarely ever happens. And now that new Cerberus exists, it's going to happen even less. Weapons are something people are relying on less and less as cards that remove health directly are becoming, stronger and stronger. Most of the time, if anything happens, you just interrupt a little bit of math, and instead of them 1-hit killing a Dag Sentinel, they 2-hit kill it and just take an extra hit, and they're eh. And unless you're some kind of mid-range strike deck, like Darkstrike Ariane, you could run Bar Fight there, because it counts as a strike, but also has that duo purpose of weapon destruction. You could Rev Knight into it, you could Crawling Hand into it. But for a Raptor, or any other deck that wants to, just go to the final fight, has a control agenda, they don't care about the damage, it doesn't matter. Now, obviously, Bar Fight and other weapon destruction are reasonable cards in aggro decks, because a lot of them deal damage in the form of, Bar Fight is a battle, right? You're doing damage. But also, the damage is much more meaningful if you do manage to destroy their weapon, they end up face-tanking something. It's more meaningful because you're an aggro deck. So that's not to say, like, weapon destruction is not useful, but, like, aggro decks, I think, for a while have not been that strong, and a result of that, weapon destruction's not been particularly prevalent on ladder. Ultimately, the point I'm about to come hard down on, what I've been leading up to, is that Weapon Linza is a dull, uninteresting, cheesy, draw-dependent mess. It's frustrating to play, and frustrating to play against. Again, if I had my way, I'd delete Weapon Linza from the game, and rebuild it from the ground up. Now, I just want to make it clear that I am incredibly biased towards Linza. She's my least favourite class, and to some people that style's going to be really fun. I don't like the draw dependency of it, because it makes me feel like I have absolutely no control over winning the game, and also the randomness of weapon destruction just feels... I don't like that about it. But some people enjoy that, and it is a valid play style, and obviously they're not going to delete the game. And I don't actually suggest deleting it. We've come this far that it's not feasible. Jagex can't delete her now. She's been like this for a year and a month. If she was going to be changed at any point, it ought to have been done in alpha, before the beta. Beta at the very latest. But I imagine what happened is that the people in charge of the game thought, this is fun, this style is enjoyable, and, you know, providing it's not a top tier deck, then I'm completely okay with that. I think that's a good enough reason for it to exist. At least, that's what I think. And that's the vision of the game. Linza's a blacksmith, she has an affinity of weapons. This happens to be her style translated into Chronicle. But again, I don't want it to be a top tier deck. And I don't think it is at the moment, but I don't know. It's really hard to tell because I haven't played against... Well, I myself haven't played very much Weapon Linza since closed beta, and all of the Weapon Linzas I've been playing against recently seem to not be that well optimized. I think some of the players that consistently got top 10 who were good with Weapon Linza have sort of stopped playing, so it's kind of really hard to judge how good Weapon Linza is right now. The best I can do is say that in all of the leagues and tournaments that I played, Weapon Linza was, you know, not a deck that you'd expect them to bring. You'd always expect them to play some other kind of Linza, but then they'd, like, pull out Weapon Linza, and you'd start the game off against them as if it was Grief Linza, and then suddenly they're a Weapon Linza trying to take a cheesy win off you. And I think, like, that's really interesting in a tournament format, but on ladder it's just annoying. I don't know, maybe if I played tournaments more often, it would also be annoying in tournaments. I don't think I can say any more. I think, like, any more discussion will just go around in circles, but we can conclude that I think Weapon Linza is cheesy, boring, draw-dependent, and just silly, but some people probably find it fun, and providing that it's not a top-tier deck, that's a good enough reason for it to exist. Linza has other styles, so that's fine. But with all of that said, I'm only going to cover 8 Linza cards. 9, actually. I'm only going to cover the ones that I've made any changes to. The ones I've left unchanged, I don't really want to talk about. This discussion here that I've just had, I hope will be adequate for covering those cards. Tetsu Katana. So the durability has been decreased by 1 and replaced with the effect, add a 0-cost Dragonbone upgrade to your hand, which is of course this card here. So you'd get one of these, it would cost 0 gold. Now, if you're going to change anything about Katana, I think it should be the durability. If you decrease the attack, you're just going to make it, like, more like Chaotic Longsword, or just a strictly better Chaotic Longsword. Or you're just going to make it like Dragon Longsword, which is a card that already exists. I think the flavorful part of this card is that it has the most attack out of any buyable weapon in the game. And it's still better than something like Dragon Longsword in the final fight. Like, an 8-2 weapon is 1 extra damage overall, but you also get to do that damage over 2 hits as opposed to 3, and that's obviously better because, well, you know, you might die before you can use all your durability. You don't want to die still with durability. I think, though, in the final fight, even though we don't see Grief Linza as much anymore, Tetsu Katana is still, like, the strongest diamond card in the game. And we know this because of Dungeoneering, right? You could just build a crappy Linza deck that has, like, nothing going for it. You get to the final card, and you're just like, I hope I pick up a Katana, and you do, and now you can win games. All you have to do is not take any damage, so don't play any unnecessary creatures. Just preserve your health, play a cabbage and a lobster here and there, keep your health high, get enough gold for this thing, go to the final fight, win the game. And this thing just randomly steals games. And it's the same in Constructed, but obviously Grief Linza's not as prevalent as it used to be, so we just don't see it as much. But it's still as strong as it used to be. Almost. It used to cost 6. But I think, personally, when they were making the nerfs, somebody thought, we're not changing Katana, it's going to stay the same, but we'll throw them a little token nerf. Here you go, it now costs 7, you can wank over that. It's not really a nerf. So I think what this does, add a 0-cost Dragonbone upgrade to your hand, is increases the amount of slots you need to get the full potential out of the card. And that's good, right? It slows it down. You can't just play this in the final fight, slot 4. Well, you can, but it just wouldn't be, like, as good. if you want to get the full value out of it now, you actually have to play it before the final fight so that you can get this Dragonbone upgrade out. And doing that also opens up some vulnerability to weapon destruction, whereas previously if you were going second, you just don't have to worry about that. You just play this card, and I think that'll still be a valid thing to do if you're going second. You'll just not have as strong of a weapon. But basically now, by getting a 0-cost Dragonbone upgrade, you get the same weapon, except it has 9 attacks, so I guess it's slightly better. And you also get 5 armor. But obviously this is now over 2 slots, and I think that's what it needed, just slowing down. Less slot efficient. The implications of this on weapon Linza are also good. It's not just Grief Linza that this sort of has an impact on, which I just think Linza's going to get stronger if this particular, if every change here was implemented. That's what I think would happen. This is a fine change to Grief Linza, and it's also a fine change to weapon Linza, because now before you start going to town and striking, you have to play another card. I bet if I had access to the stats and we could pull up how successful a game is that has a katana opening, it would, just be noticeably more successful on the win rate compared to starting with Chaotic Long or something. I don't have those stats, though. Next up, Dragonbone Upgrade. This is actually in the game. They made exactly the same change that I was going to suggest. A fine change. I cannot believe that it's now 2016, in fact nearly 2017, and this card still doesn't have Exhaust written on it. This is such horseshit. In the context of Linza, where you have weapons, Exhaust isn't even, that much of a change. For AP decks, your attack power is reduced literally to 1. But for weapon Linza, you still have a massive weapon. It just frustrates me that you can gain 3 temporary attack and then carry that through into the next creature. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it doesn't need Exhaust. Maybe you just get rid of the temporary attack and leave the card as it is. That would be a good change. And it would also make the card less homogeneous with the other Revenants. Again, I'm really biased towards weapon Linza. I don't want it to be a top tier deck. Of course I'm going to suggest this kind of thing. Next up, Work Order. It should say spend. It says strike because spelling errors. But yeah, spend weapon, add weapon, it's blah blah blah. It's the same card. It just has an extra 1 gold reward. A long time ago, I think just as the open beta was sort of ending and we were going into full release, this card, I'm not sure when actually, but it used to say add your weapon attack and 2 health to rival's next creature. You didn't have to spend a weapon, so if you didn't have a weapon, it would just add 2 health to your rival's next creature, and then it would add 0 weapon attack because you didn't have an attack. But it would always add 2 health to your rival's next creature, guaranteed 100% of the time, irrespective of whether you have a weapon or not. And then when that happened, it just dropped out. People stopped using it. Back then, though, Grief Linza was a different deck. There were two Linza decks, right? There was Grief Linza, which was all about adding health to everything with Fern, Work Order, other cards, adding attack, Dr. Fenkenstrain. The whole deck, Grief Linza, was about griefing everything. Back then, Moena used to add 3 health to your rival's next creature, and it did 2 damage to them. Holy crap. But the idea was you decrease their base attack with Dust Devil and increase the health of all of their creatures, and then they just die because they can't fight anything. Everything they try to fight, they have less base attack, and it has much more health. But then people wised up and realized, oh, to beat this deck, I shouldn't play large creatures. I should just be really conservative, really safe. And they also nerfed Moena, obviously. They nerfed Fern, they nerfed Work Order. That deck disappeared. And then there was another deck, which is what we currently call Grief Linza. That's that final fight style, I'm going to reduce your base attack. That's not Grief Linza, but it just became what everyone called Grief Linza. That was, I don't even remember what we called it, but there was a distinction. I can't, for the life of me, remember what we used to call that. But there was 2 distinct Linzas, as well as Weapon Linza, so 3 in total. But now, Grief Linza is just homogenous with, yeah, everyone knows what that is. And in that deck, you wouldn't put Work Order because you only had a limited number of weapons to spend, and the effects that Fremennik Crafter, Dust Devil, and Varrock Museum gave you were just far better than what Work Order gave you. Work Order just didn't fit the deck. The Grief Linza we know and love today is a through and through, I'm going to go to the final fight, and instead of building my own base attack, I'm going to reduce yours to effectively have the same thing, just in reverse. And sometimes you'd reduce their base attack low enough that they would take a lot of extra damage along the way, and that was just a bonus. I think Work Order now would go into an aggro deck, an aggro Linza, and I think Dust Devil would also go into aggro Linza. I don't think Karam necessarily would. Maybe. But instead of going to the final fight, what you'd do is cut, repurpose, you'd cut Stamina Potion, you'd cut a lot of the heals and instead replace them with damage. And aggro Linza did used to be a thing. There was this deck that, back when Yoga Shaman dealt damage to your rival equal to their hand size times 2, so if they had 10 cards in hand it would deal 20 damage, That, used to run that card as well as Melzar the Mad, which used to add 3 Tainted Cabbages to your rival's hand, not their deck, to their hand, straight up 3 cabbages in their hand. And that was, like, one hell of a combo. And also, you'd run Rowdy Cannoneer. And Aggro Linza was a thing. But, like, it just doesn't exist anymore. Well, it exists, but nobody runs it, because why would you? Repurpose is so much better than Scorpion. Or I should say, Repurpose is so much better than Work Order. Perhaps that's a fairer comparison, because they're both spend weapon cards. But, like, yeah, going to the final fight as Linza is so much better than the aggro style. I just think, like, Work Order goes in a deck that is bad, so you just need to make Work Order a lot better. In fact, you could give it, like, a 3 gold reward. Holy shit, that would be really cool then. You've got, like, this extra Ali Morrisane card. Thing is, though, that might go into Weapon Linza too. That would be an indirect buff to Weapon Linza. It's kind of tricky. At any rate, spending weapon for the effect Work Order has is not as good as the other spend weapon effects. Ramaki Hoarder. Add 2 random equipment to your hand. Again, nobody wants to kill a 2/7 for 2 random cards. Fine, if it said draw 2 equipment from your deck, that would be a lot better. That would be a fine change. But it seems that every class has some card that adds random insert theme here. And Linza's theme is clearly equipment. Like the other cards I've spoken about that add random stuff to your hand, you need a lot of them to be added so that you can find, at least something that's useful among the other bits and bobs. Equipment isn't just weapons, like D-Long, D-Skim. You can get those, but there are other, like, really good equipment, like Full Darrock. Adamant Armor is an equipment people forget about. It's not the best, but obviously it's an equipment. Ring of Recoil, again, not the best. But something interesting, and if you haven't seen the cards I'm about to point out, these here, these are not cards, these are tokens that you effectively get from killing something. And then it adds these to your hand. And I spoke about in the suggested rework for God Wars bosses video. These are all equipment. Amaldi's Judgment isn't, but it could be. And I admit, adding one of these to your hands would be bloody insane, but it's interesting, right? The point I'm making is there are some really unexpected equipments. And, you can add random spells to your hand, like out of the Ancient Spellbook and Lunar Spellbook. The likelihood of it is that those cards I just showed will never make it to the game. Because, well, they might, but you have to create art assets for them, whereas the Tetsu Katana suggestion, like Dragonbone upgrade, already exists in the game, so that's much easier. Anyway, the point is, this is clearly not very good, and this still might not be that good, but it's better. Major Mary. So no change, but I meant to put a change. It just never got put on the card by the looks of it. The change that I wanted to suggest, that other people have also suggested, is that, alright, firstly would decrease the cost to 0. Next, make it spend weapon, rival gains a weapon equal to the one you just spent. So basically what it would be is, you could just word it as give rival your weapon. So it has the same effect as current Major Mary. It replaces, your opponent's weapon with perhaps a weapon they just don't want or are not expecting to get. But for it to have that effect, you have to give them your weapon. So you have to pick up like a Goblin Raider weapon or a Geeka weapon, whatever it is, and then you give that weapon to them. If you do not have a weapon, obviously you have no weapon to give them, you do not replace their weapon. And then you get a 1/1 weapon as normal. The idea behind that change was, this is the mother of destruction to Weapon Linza. Whenever Weapon Linza becomes any kind of prevalent on ladder, or if there's just some guy that keeps queuing it up and you want a deck that's safe. Grief Linza, everyone just jumps to Grief Linza. Because it's a reasonable deck. It doesn't have any objectively terrible matchups. It's certainly not as good as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. And it also has this fuck you card to Weapon Linza that wins all of the time. In any other matchup, Major Mary is like, I'm tempted to say it's like a worse tool belt, but that's not true because it gives you a 1/1 weapon. So not only is this weapon destruction, but it's also, you can use this to activate Repurpose, Karam, whatever it is. I also just want to put it out there, I don't really have too much of a problem with this staying the way that it is, and that's because I'm biased and I really dislike Weapon Linza, so I'm okay with a card that completely hard counters it existing. But that's obviously not good for the game. Hard counters are silly. So if I was actually in charge, yes, I would make the suggestion where you make it cost 0, give your rival your weapon. Living Rock Brawler. Just doesn't do enough. So what is this, right? Let's pretend that this is a 0 cost support, and if it were, then its effect would be add 1 attack to your weapon and you get a gold reward. It's not very good. Living Rock Brawler is basically that, because when you kill it, you use up a durability, so this +1 durability doesn't matter. It might as well just be a 0 cost support that adds 1 weapon attack and gives you a gold. I think it needs to do more than that. So you don't lose any durability, you still get that 1 that compensates for the one you used to kill it, but you also get 2 attack And now, this card is more clearly defined as the weapon attack increaser. This might even find a spot in Weapon Linza. Maybe. I don't know if that's true. If it did, it wouldn't make the deck that much better. But it might tide you over that 1 extra gold you need for Pulverize or Wilderness or whatever it is. I think, though, the deck this does go into, which will mostly be Dungeoneering decks, it now has like a more slightly potent effect. Like now you can upgrade your weapon to as a reach tool a bit better. Flurry. So this just isn't very good because, like, in fact, it basically doesn't do anything. If you have a weapon, let's say you have a Chaotic Longsword for the sake of argument, and your 2 base attack, so you have 8 total attack, and then you want to walk up to a Jad, well, you might as well just walk up to the Jad and kill it. Flurry literally doesn't do anything. You don't save any durability. In the specific example of Jad, you don't save any health. Alright, maybe you're 2-hit killing something, and you can use Flurry as, like, kind of health gain, because now you take 1 less hit off the monster. Alright, but, like, oh, that's still not very good. Even in Dungeoneering. So, the only role this could possibly have is health gain, kind of. I think it was supposed to be reach, but as a reach tool, alright, let's put this in an AP deck, which you can run. You can run AP Linza, it's just not very good. I used to run this AP Linza that had Tormented Demons to kill Dust Devils. I quite enjoyed doing that. And also Commander Zilliana in the deck to get 7 gold for Karam. So it was this super greedy Grief Linza that went to the final fight with loads of base attack and reduced your opponent's base attack. I even played it against that Jim once on, I don't know, I think he was probably just playtesting or on his lunch break or something, but that was quite funny. He played Char. I think he might have been testing out Char. That was a long time ago, though. Do I think that deck's any good? It's not awful, but it's not that good compared to the actual, like, meta Linza styles. But you certainly wouldn't put Flurry in that deck, because Gravite Longsword is just really objectively better, right? A 4-1 weapon. And even then, you probably wouldn't run that, because Toxil is just, well, once you're on 3 base attack, it's a net loss of 0 life, just like Gravite Longsword. And also, it's not a weapon that can be destroyed, because it's not a weapon. Flurry is, okay, if you're on 2 base attack at the very start of the game, it's 2 damage, which is not useful as a reach tool. But okay, it gets much better once you start building your base attack. Once you're up to 5 base attack, Flurry's now reasonable. But at that point in the game, you have 5 base attack. You don't need reach, really. At any rate, Toxil is still better. So I wanted Flurry, I wanted to change it to more of a reach tool, because that feels like what it is. Or what it was supposed to be. Strike your next creature twice. Remove weapon. Now, striking your next creature twice is really strong, because if you're on 2 base attack, which is effectively, well, it is what you start the game with, that's 4 damage. That's already Toxil. So this can't cost 0, because if you have 3 base attack, so you go KGP Flurry, you're now doing 6 damage, which is enormous. So I think you make it cost 1 just to slow it down that little bit. And also, this gets incredibly good for reaching into something like Bilrak or Gluttonous Behemoth. So remove weapon, I think, is needed to make that more difficult too. But I can't see this breaking the game. Raging Calphite, which we've covered already. I did that in the armor destruction video, so I won't talk about it here. And then there's 30 other cards that I'm not going to talk about, like I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you very much for listening. If you thought this was interesting, do leave a like. I appreciate that this video has been a bit more salty than the other ones. I do apologize for that. I think it's just because we are talking about a class that... it's a topic that just frustrates me. And I think that's coming through. Back to normal for the next video, though. Thanks for watching again. Goodbye.